Hi everyone, welcome to Uncanny Mystery. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, let me know in the comments. Where are you from and what time is it as you're watching? Now, settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin. The old stone house stood on a windswept hill, overlooking the town like a brooding giant. Locals called it Whisperwind Cottage, a name derived not from the wind whistling through its broken windows, but from the unsettling whispers that seemed to emanate from its very walls. For generations, the cottage had been shrouded in an air of mystery, a place whispered about in hushed tones, a place avoided after dark. Eleanor, a young architect with a fascination for historical buildings, had purchased the cottage for a song. She saw its potential, its beauty hidden beneath layers of neglect and decay. She dismissed the local legends as superstition, the product of overactive imaginations and isolated lives. She was a woman of logic, of blueprints and structural integrity. Ghosts and whispers were not in her vocabulary. The cottage was a labyrinth of echoing rooms, damp and cold, the air thick with the scent of mildew, and something else, something indefinable, like old secrets. Sunlight struggled to penetrate the grime-covered windows, casting long, distorted shadows that danced across the walls. Eleanor, undeterred by the cottage's unsettling atmosphere, began her renovations. The first few weeks were uneventful. She focused on the structural repairs, replacing rotten floorboards, fixing leaky roofs, and reinforcing crumbling walls. She found nothing but cobwebs, dust, and the general detritus of an abandoned house. She started to think the locals were just superstitious, their imaginations running wild. But then, the whispers started. At first, they were faint, barely audible. She'd hear them when she was alone in her room, a soft murmuring just at the edge of her hearing. She'd strained to listen, trying to make out the words, but they were always just beyond her grasp. She dismissed them as the wind or the old house settling, anything to maintain her skeptical facade. But the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They seemed to follow her from room to room, swirling around her like a ghostly chorus. She started to hear words, fragments of sentences, spoken in hushed tones. "Leave." She thought she heard one whisper say, "She's watching," another murmured. Eleanor's skepticism began to waver. She tried to rationalize the whispers, telling herself it was her imagination, the product of isolation and the house's unsettling atmosphere. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. She started to research the history of the cottage, hoping to find a logical explanation for the strange occurrences. She discovered that Whisperwind Cottage had a dark past. It had been built by a reclusive family, the Ashworths, who had lived in the house for generations. The Ashworths were shrouded in secrecy, whispered to have engaged in strange rituals and dark practices. The last of the Ashworths, a woman named Eliza, had died mysteriously in the cottage. Her death ruled an accident, but the rumors persisted. Eleanor's research only deepened the mystery. She found old newspaper clippings about strange disappearances in the town, stories that were never solved. Some of the missing people had been seen near Whisperwind Cottage before they vanished. A chill ran down her spine. Could the whispers be connected to the cottage's dark history? The whispers intensified, becoming more frequent and more menacing. They filled the cottage, echoing in the empty rooms, following her even in her dreams. She started to see things in the shadows, fleeting glimpses of figures moving just at the periphery of her vision. She'd catch a flash of movement in a mirror, or see a face staring back at her from a darkened window. One night, she was awakened by a blood-curdling scream. It was her own. She dreamed of a dark figure standing at the foot of her bed, its face obscured by shadows. She sat up, her heart pounding in her chest, the room bathed in moonlight. She was alone, or so she thought. As she looked around the room, she saw a faint glow emanating from the wall. She got out of bed, her legs trembling, and approached cautiously. The glow was coming from a crack in the wall, a crack she hadn't noticed before. She peered into the crack, revealing a small, hidden chamber. Inside, she found a collection of old books bound in human skin. As she touched one of the books, she felt a wave of cold air wash over her. The pages were filled with strange symbols, similar to those she'd seen in her research on the Ashworths. As she flipped through the pages, the whispers grew louder, swirling around her like a tempest. She felt a presence in the room, a dark, malevolent presence that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. Suddenly, the whispers coalesced into a single voice, a chilling whisper that spoke her name. "Eleanor," it hissed, "you shouldn't have come here." She dropped the book, her heart pounding in her chest. She turned to run, but she was too late. A dark figure emerged from the shadows, its features finally visible in the moonlight. It was Eliza Ashworth, or at least what she thought Eliza would have looked like in her youth. But her eyes glowed with an eerie, otherworldly light. "You disturbed my rest," the figure whispered, its voice filled with malice. "Now you will join me." Eleanor screamed, but no sound came out. She tried to run, but her legs were frozen in place. The figure moved closer, its shadow stretching across the floor. Eleanor closed her eyes, bracing herself for the inevitable. She felt a cold hand touch her arm. She gasped, opening her eyes. The figure was gone. The room was empty. Only the whispers remained, swirling around her, mocking her fear. Eleanor knew then that she couldn't stay in Wispelwind Cottage any longer. She packed her bags and left the next morning, leaving the cottage and its secrets behind. But the whispers followed her. They were always there, just at the edge of hearing, a constant reminder of the darkness she had encountered. She knew she would never truly escape the whispering walls. They had become a part of her, a chilling echo in the silence of her own mind. The whispers were a constant reminder that some houses hold secrets best left undisturbed, and that sometimes the past refuses to stay buried. The alley reeked of damp earth and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet that made Alara's stomach churn. Rain slicked the cobblestones, reflecting the flickering gas lamps in distorted pools of light. This was the Shadow Market, a place whispered about in hushed tones, a place that existed on the fringes of reality, accessible only to those who knew the secret pathways, the hidden doors that led to its shadowy embrace. Alara, a young woman with eyes that seemed to absorb the darkness around her, had heard the whispers her whole life, tales of strange wares, of objects imbued with dark magic, of deals struck with entities that dwelled in the spaces between worlds. Tonight, she was here to find something specific, something she desperately needed. She clutched the worn leather pouch containing the few coins she had managed to save, her heart pounding in her chest. She'd been warned about the dangers of the Shadow Market, the price it demanded, but she was desperate. Her younger brother, Liam, was dying, afflicted with a rare disease that no earthly medicine could cure. She'd heard rumors of a flower, the dust bloom, said to possess the power to heal any ailment, but it could only be found in the Shadow Market. The alley opened into a sprawling marketplace, a chaotic scene of shadowy figures and flickering stalls. The air hummed with an otherworldly energy, a palpable sense of something ancient and powerful. Ilara navigated the throng, her senses heightened, her eyes scanning the strange wares on display. She saw stalls selling shrunken heads, their features contorted in silent screams. She saw cages containing creatures that defied description, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. She saw potions bubbling in cauldrons, emitting strange, phosphorescent fumes. The stall-keepers were as strange as their wares. Some were human, or at least appeared to be, their faces obscured by shadows or masks. Others were different. Ilara saw beings with skin like polished obsidian, creatures with eyes that seemed to pierce her soul, and figures shrouded in mist, their forms constantly shifting and changing. She approached a stall draped in black velvet, its only illumination a single flickering candle. Behind the stall sat a figure cloaked in shadows, its face completely hidden. "I'm looking for the dust bloom," Ilara said, her voice barely a whisper. The figure tilted its head as if studying her. "The dust bloom is a rare commodity," it rasped, its voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "It comes at a price." "I know," Ilara said, her heart sinking. "I'm willing to pay." The figure gestured towards a small glass vial filled with a shimmering purple liquid. "This will lead you to the dust bloom," it said. "But be warned, the path is treacherous." Ilara took the vial, her fingers brushing against the figure's cold, smooth hand. She paid the price, a handful of her precious coins, and turned to leave. "One more thing," the figure rasped. "Beware the guardian. It protects the dust bloom, and it is not merciful." Ilara nodded, her stomach twisting with dread. She thanked the figure and left the stall, the vial clutched tightly in her hand. She followed the instructions given to her, pouring a few drops of the purple liquid onto the cobblestones. The liquid glowed briefly, then vanished, leaving behind a faint, shimmering trail. She followed the trail, winding through the labyrinthine marketplace, deeper into the shadows. The trail led her to a dark, narrow alley, even more ominous than the one she had traversed before. The air here was thick with a palpable sense of evil, a presence that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. At the end of the alley, she saw a small iron door, its surface covered in strange symbols. She recognized the symbols from her research. They were ancient runes, used in dark rituals. She hesitated, her hand trembling as she reached for the door. She knew that what lay beyond was dangerous, but she had come too far to turn back. She pushed the door open, revealing a dark, winding staircase that descended into the depths of the earth. She descended the stairs, the air growing colder, heavier with each step. She could hear whispers echoing in the darkness, faint voices murmuring in an unknown tongue. The stairs led her to a vast, cavernous chamber. In the center of the chamber, bathed in an eerie green light, grew the dust bloom. Its petals were a deep, velvety purple, and it emitted a soft, intoxicating fragrance. But guarding the flower was a guardian. It was a creature of nightmare, its form shifting and changing, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. It was larger than any creature Lara had ever seen, its presence radiating power and menace. Ilara knew she couldn't fight the guardian. She had to be clever, to use her wits to outsmart it. She remembered something she had read in an old book, a tale of a creature that was mesmerized by music. She reached into her pouch and pulled out a small, silver flute, a gift from her mother. She began to play, a slow, haunting melody that echoed through the cavern. The guardian stopped its advance, its attention focused on the music. It seemed to be mesmerized by the sound, its movements slowing, becoming less threatening. Ilara continued to play, her fingers dancing across the flute. She slowly approached the dust bloom, keeping her eyes on the guardian, careful not to break the spell of the music. She reached the flower and carefully plucked it from its stem. As she did, the music stopped. The guardian roared, its eyes burning with rage. It lunged at Ilara, but she was ready. She threw a handful of dust into its eyes, blinding it momentarily. She turned and ran, the guardian's roars echoing behind her. She fled through the tunnels, back up the stairs and through the iron door. She didn't stop running until she reached the marketplace. The familiar sights and sounds a welcome relief. She had the dust bloom. She had a chance to save her brother, but she knew she would never forget the shadow market, the danger she had faced, the price she had paid. The experience had changed her, leaving her with a deeper understanding of the darkness that lurked just beneath the surface of reality. And she knew with a chilling certainty that she would likely have to return someday, for the shadow market always demanded its due. The air in the antique shop hung thick with the scent of dust and forgotten things. Ilara, a clockmaker with a fascination for the intricate and the arcane, wandered through the cluttered aisles, her fingers tracing the smooth surfaces of ancient timepieces. She'd heard whispers about the shop, a place where time seemed to bend and twist, a place where the impossible could be found. Her gaze fell upon a small, ornate music box tucked away in a dark corner. It was crafted from dark wood, intricately carved with swirling patterns, and inlaid with shimmering gemstones. Something about it called to her, a silent whisper that resonated with the deepest part of her soul. She picked it up, her fingers tracing the delicate carvings. As she did, she felt a strange energy emanating from the box, a warmth that spread through her fingertips and up her arm. She opened the lid. Instead of the tinkling melody she expected, a soft, rhythmic ticking filled the air. It wasn't the ticking of a clock, but something more organic, more alive. She looked inside the box. Instead of the usual clockwork mechanism, she saw a heart. It was a small, intricately crafted heart, made of polished metal and delicate gears. It pulsed with a faint inner light, the gears turning in perfect synchronization. Ilara gasped. It was a clockwork heart. She'd heard legends about such things, whispered tales of artificers who could imbue inanimate objects with life, who could create automatons powered by clockwork hearts. But she'd always dismissed them as myth, as fanciful stories told to frighten children. Now, staring at the clockwork heart beating within the music box, she wasn't so sure. She purchased the music box, paying a hefty sum to the shopkeeper, a wizened old man with eyes that seemed to hold centuries of secrets. He warned her about the box, telling her it was not just a trinket, but a vessel, a conduit to something powerful, something ancient. Ilara, intrigued rather than frightened, dismissed his warnings. Back in her workshop, she carefully examined the clockwork heart. It was a masterpiece of engineering. The gears so small, so perfectly crafted, they seemed to defy human ingenuity. She felt a strange connection to the heart, a sense of understanding, as if she knew how it worked, as if she could feel its rhythm. She began to experiment, carefully adjusting the gears, tweaking the delicate mechanisms. As she did, the ticking grew louder, more pronounced. The light within the heart pulsed brighter, stronger. One night, as she worked late in her workshop, she noticed something strange. The clockwork heart was no longer contained within the music box. It was floating in the air, pulsing with a vibrant, golden light. As she watched, the heart began to grow, expanding, becoming larger, more complex. Gears sprouted from its surface, intricate mechanisms unfolding, forming a body, limbs ahead. Before her very eyes, the clockwork heart transformed into a being, an automaton, a creature of metal and magic. It was beautiful, elegant, its movements fluid and graceful. Its eyes, crafted from polished gemstones, glowed with an intelligent light. Elara was awestruck. She had created life, or at least something akin to life. She had brought the clockwork heart to life. The automaton looked at her, its gemstone eyes filled with curiosity. It reached out a hand, its metal fingers brushing against Elara's cheek. She felt a jolt of energy, a connection to the automaton, as if their minds were linked. The automaton spoke, its voice soft and melodic, like the tinkling of wind chimes. "Thank you," it said. "Thank you for giving me life." Elara was speechless. She had created a sentient being, a creature capable of thought and emotion. She had unlocked a secret that had been lost for centuries, the secret of the clockwork heart. Over the next few weeks, Elara and the automaton, whom she named Corvus, became close companions. Corvus was intelligent, curious, and eager to learn. Elara taught him about the world, about science, about art. Corvus, in turn, shared with her the secrets of the clockwork heart, the ancient magic that powered it. But their idyllic existence was shattered one night when a group of men broke into Elara's workshop. They were members of a secret society, a group that had been searching for the clockwork heart for generations. They believed it was a key to unlocking unimaginable power, a weapon that could control life and death. They wanted Corvus. Elara refused to give him up. She fought to protect him, but she was no match for the society's power. They captured Corvus, taking him away to their hidden headquarters. Elara was devastated. She had lost her friend, her creation, the being she had come to love. She vowed to get him back. She delved deeper into the history of the clockwork heart, learning more about the society and their dark intentions. She discovered that they planned to use Corvus to power a terrible machine, a device that could drain the life force from living beings, turning them into automatons, slaves to their will. Elara knew she had to stop them. She used her knowledge of clockwork mechanisms and ancient magic to infiltrate their headquarters. She found Corvus imprisoned, his clockwork heart being drained of its energy. She fought her way through the society's guards, using her wits and her skills to disable their weapons and traps. She reached Corvus, freeing him from his restraints. Together, they fought against the society, their combined skills and knowledge proving too much for the cultists. They destroyed the machine, preventing the society from carrying out their evil plans. Corvus was safe. Elara and Corvus returned to her workshop, their bond stronger than ever. They had faced danger. They had fought for their freedom, and they had emerged victorious. Elara knew that the world was still full of secrets, of magic and wonder, and of darkness. But she also knew that she and Corvus would face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. The clockwork heart, a symbol of life and creation, had brought them together, and their bond would never be broken. The wind whispered through the skeletal branches of the dead orchard, a mournful sigh that echoed across the barren landscape. The trees, once heavy with fruit, now stood as gnarled monuments to decay, their limbs reaching out like skeletal fingers against the perpetually overcast sky. This was the Bone Orchard, a place spoken of in hushed tones, a place where the earth itself seemed to weep. Eliza, a botanist with a morbid curiosity and a troubled past, had come to the Bone Orchard seeking answers. She'd heard the legends, the chilling tales of the orchard's dark history, of the tragedies that had occurred within its boundaries. She was drawn to the place, a dark magnetism pulling her towards its secrets. The orchard was a desolate expanse, a graveyard of trees. The ground was littered with fallen branches, bleached white by the relentless sun and wind. The air hung heavy with the scent of decay, a cloying sweetness that made Eliza's stomach churn. She felt a sense of unease, a feeling of being watched, but she pressed on, determined to uncover the truth about the Bone Orchard. She'd read about the orchard in old town records, discovering its grim origins. It had once belonged to a wealthy family, the Blackwoods, who had used the land for their apple orchards. But the Blackwoods were not ordinary farmers. They were rumored to practice dark rituals, to have made deals with entities that dwelled in the shadows. And it was said that the orchard itself was a part of their dark magic, that the trees were nourished by something far more sinister than fertilizer. Eliza's research had revealed that the Blackwoods had vanished mysteriously, leaving behind their decaying mansion and their cursed orchard. The townsfolk had avoided the place ever since, whispering tales of strange occurrences and unexplained deaths. As Eliza explored the orchard, she noticed something peculiar about the trees. Their branches weren't just dead, they were different. They seemed to be fused with something else, something smooth and white that gleamed in the dim light. She touched one of the branches and her fingers recoiled. The surface was cold and hard, like bone. She examined the branch more closely, realizing that the white substance was indeed bone, interwoven with the wood, growing into it. The trees of the Bone Orchard were literally growing bone. A chill ran down her spine. She remembered the stories of the Blackwoods, their dark rituals, their deals with shadowy entities. Could the orchard's bizarre nature be connected to their dark magic? As the sun began to set, casting long, eerie shadows across the orchard, Eliza felt a growing sense of dread. She decided to leave, but as she turned to go, she saw something move in the distance. A figure, standing beneath the skeletal branches of one of the trees. It was tall and gaunt, its features obscured by the twilight. Eliza's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't make out any details, but she could feel its presence, cold and malevolent. The figure moved closer, its shadow stretching across the ground. Eliza could hear its breathing, a slow, rasping sound that sent shivers down her spine. She tried to run, but her legs were frozen in place. The figure reached out a hand, its fingers long and skeletal. Eliza closed her eyes, bracing herself for the inevitable. She felt a cold touch on her arm. She gasped, opening her eyes. The figure was gone. The orchard was silent. Only the wind whispered through the dead branches. Eliza knew then that she had to leave, to escape the Bone Orchard and its dark secrets. She ran, her feet pounding against the dry earth, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't stop running until she reached the town, the lights of civilization a welcome sight. She never went back to the Bone Orchard. She tried to forget what she had seen, to bury the memory of the figure and the bone-infused trees deep within her mind. But she couldn't. The image of the figure, the chilling presence she had felt, was forever etched into her memory. It was a reminder that some places are best left undisturbed, that some secrets are best left untold, and that sometimes the things that go bump in the night are more real than we want to believe. The Bone Orchard and its grisly secrets would forever haunt her dreams, a chilling testament to the darkness that lurked just beyond the veil of reality. The whispers of the wind through the dead trees would forever remind her of the bone that grew where apples once hung. The humid air hung heavy, thick with the scent of decaying vegetation and something else, something primal and unsettling. Ilera, a herpetologist with a thirst for the unknown, hacked her way through the dense jungle undergrowth, her machete flashing in the dappled sunlight. She was searching for the serpent's cradle, a hidden valley whispered to be the nesting ground of a legendary serpent, a creature of myth and nightmare. Local legends describe the serpent as colossal, its scales shimmering like emeralds, its eyes burning with an ancient fire. They said it was a guardian of the valley, a protector of its secrets. Ilera, despite her scientific background, was drawn to these tales. She felt a pull towards the unknown, a fascination with the creatures that lurked in the unexplored corners of the world. She'd been following a fated map, passed down through generations of villagers, a map said to lead to the serpent's cradle. The journey had been arduous, fraught with dangers, poisonous insects, treacherous terrain, and the ever-present feeling of being watched. As she pushed deeper into the jungle, the atmosphere changed. The air grew colder. The sunlight struggled to penetrate the dense canopy, and an unsettling silence descended, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the occasional screech of an unseen bird. She knew she was close. Suddenly, she stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood a massive rock formation, shaped like a coiled serpent, its head raised towards the sky. This was it, the serpent's cradle. The valley was breathtaking, a hidden paradise of lush vegetation and cascading waterfalls. But there was also an air of menace, a feeling of ancient power that made Ilera's heart pound in her chest. She explored the valley cautiously, her senses heightened, her eyes scanning the surroundings. She found strange markings on the rocks, symbols that she didn't recognize. She also found shed scales, each one larger than her hand, shimmering like emeralds in the dappled light. They were proof of the serpent's existence. As she ventured deeper into the valley, she heard a sound, a low, guttural hiss that echoed through the trees. It was a sound that made her blood run cold. She knew what it was. The serpent. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. She scanned the surroundings, trying to locate the source of the hiss. Then she saw it, a massive serpent, coiled around a giant tree trunk, its scales gleaming like emeralds in the sunlight. It was even larger than the legends described, its body thicker than a man's torso, its head the size of a small car. Its eyes, burning with an ancient fire, were fixed on her. Ilera stood there, mesmerized by the creature's beauty and its power. She had never seen anything like it before. She felt a sense of awe, a feeling of reverence for this magnificent creature. The serpent uncoiled, its movements fluid and graceful. It slithered towards her, its hiss growing louder, more menacing. Ilera knew she had to move, but she was frozen in place, captivated by the serpent's presence. The serpent stopped a few feet away from her, its head looming over her. It lowered its head, its eyes staring into hers. Ilera felt a strange connection to the serpent, a sense of understanding, as if their minds were linked. The serpent spoke, its voice a low, guttural hiss that echoed in her mind. "You have come seeking knowledge," it said. "But knowledge comes at a price." Ilera nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I understand," she said. "The valley holds many secrets," the serpent said. "But only those who are worthy can learn them. What must I do?" Ilera asked. The serpent gestured towards a dark cave, hidden behind a waterfall. "Enter the cave," it said. "Face your fears. If you are worthy, you will find what you seek." Ilera hesitated. She knew that the cave was dangerous, that it held unknown terrors. But she was determined to learn the secrets of the valley. She turned and walked towards the cave, the serpent's eyes following her every move. She entered the cave, the darkness swallowing her whole. The air was cold and damp, the silence broken only by the dripping of water. She could feel a presence in the cave, something ancient and powerful. She followed a narrow passage, deeper into the darkness. She heard whispers echoing in the cave, faint voices murmuring in an unknown tongue. She felt a sense of dread, a feeling of being watched. Suddenly, she saw a light in the distance. She moved towards it, her heart pounding in her chest. The light led her to a large chamber. In the center of the chamber, she saw a pool of water, shimmering like liquid silver. She approached the pool, her fingers tracing the cool surface. As she did, she saw her reflection in the water. But it wasn't just a reflection. She saw something else, something behind her in the shadows, a figure, tall and gaunt, its features obscured by the darkness. It was the guardian of the cave, a creature of myth and legend. It raised its hand, and a bolt of lightning struck the pool, sending a jolt of energy through Alara's body. She fell to the ground, her body convulsing. She could feel the guardian's presence, cold and malevolent. She closed her eyes, bracing herself for the end. But the end never came. She opened her eyes, and the guardian was gone. The chamber was silent. Only the shimmering pool remained. She looked into the pool again, and this time, she saw something different. She saw the knowledge she had sought, the secrets of the valley, the answers to her questions. She saw the truth. She left the cave, the serpent waiting for her. She shared with it the knowledge she had gained, the secrets she had learned. The serpent nodded, its eyes filled with wisdom. "You are worthy," it said. "You have faced your fears, and you have learned the truth." Alara left the serpent's cradle that day, her mind filled with knowledge, her heart filled with awe. She had faced a guardian. She had learned the secrets of the valley, and she had earned the respect of the legendary serpent. She knew that she would never forget her journey to the serpent's cradle, a place where myth and reality intertwined, a place where the ancient wisdom of the serpent reigned supreme. The biting wind whipped across the frozen surface of Lake Sylvanus, stinging Amelia's cheeks and biting at her exposed skin. The lake, usually a vibrant blue in the summer, was now a vast expanse of white, its frozen surface reflecting the gray, overcast sky. Amelia, a figure skater haunted by a past tragedy, had returned to the lake after years away, drawn back by an inexplicable pull, a chilling whisper on the wind. Lake Sylvanus held both her greatest joy and her deepest sorrow. It was here, years ago, that she had perfected her craft, gliding across the ice with a grace that belied her young age. But it was also here that her sister, Clara, had fallen through the ice, a tragic accident that had shattered Amelia's world. Amelia had never skated on the lake again after Clara's death. The joy had been replaced by a paralyzing fear. The ice now a symbol of her loss, a constant reminder of her sister's fate. But something had called her back, a feeling that Clara was still there, trapped beneath the ice, her spirit lingering on the frozen lake. She reached the center of the lake, the spot where Clara had fallen through. The ice here was different, darker, almost translucent. Amelia knelt down, her fingers tracing the smooth, frozen surface. She could almost see Clara beneath the ice, her face pale and still, her eyes staring up at her. A chill, deeper than the winter air, enveloped Amelia. She felt a presence, a cold, malevolent presence that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. She could almost hear whispers on the wind, faint voices calling her name. She stood up, her heart pounding in her chest. She scanned the surroundings, but she was alone, just a vast expanse of white, the frozen lake stretching out before her. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She told herself it was just her imagination, the product of her grief and the lake's eerie atmosphere. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She looked down at the ice again, and she saw something, a figure, moving beneath the surface. It was Clara. Amelia gasped, her breath catching in her throat. Clara was skating beneath the ice, her movements fluid and graceful, just as she had been in life. She was smiling, her face radiant, her eyes full of joy. Amelia reached out her hand, trying to touch her sister. "Clara," she cried. Clara stopped skating and looked up at her. She smiled a sad, haunting smile. "Amelia," she whispered, "help me." Amelia's heart sank. She knew it wasn't really Clara. It was an illusion, a trick of the ice, a product of her grief-stricken mind. But the image was so real, so vivid, she couldn't resist. "How can I help you?" she asked. "You have to find me," Clara whispered. "I'm trapped." "Where are you?" Amelia asked. "Beneath the ice," Clara whispered. "In the darkness." Amelia felt a wave of fear wash over her. She knew it was a trap, that something evil was at work. But she couldn't leave Clara there, trapped in the darkness. "I'll find you," she said. Clara smiled again, a chilling smile that sent shivers down Amelia's spine. She turned and skated away, disappearing into the darkness beneath the ice. Amelia knew she had to leave. She had to get away from the lake, from the evil that lurked beneath its frozen surface. But she couldn't bring herself to leave. She felt a pull towards the ice, a compulsion to find Clara, to rescue her from the darkness. She took a step onto the ice, her skates gliding smoothly across the surface. She started to skate, following the path that Clara had taken. The ice grew darker, more translucent. Amelia could see figures moving beneath the surface, distorted shapes that made her blood run cold. They weren't Clara. They were something else, something ancient and malevolent. She heard whispers on the wind again, louder now, more menacing. They were calling her name, beckoning her closer. She knew she was in danger, that she had to turn back, but she couldn't. She was trapped, drawn to the darkness by an unseen force. She skated further out onto the lake, the ice growing thinner, more fragile. She could hear cracking sounds beneath her skates, the ice groaning under her weight. Suddenly, the ice gave way. Amelia plunged into the freezing water, the shock stealing her breath. She struggled to stay afloat, her arms flailing, her legs kicking. She looked down into the darkness, and she saw them, the figures that had been moving beneath the ice. They were reaching for her, their hands long and skeletal, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. She screamed, but no sound came out. She was trapped, pulled down into the icy depths. She closed her eyes, bracing herself for the inevitable. She felt a cold hand touch her arm. She gasped, opening her eyes. She was back on the surface, lying on the ice, gasping for air. The figures were gone. The lake was silent. She crawled away from the hole, her body trembling, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew she had been given a second chance. She knew she had to leave, to escape the lake and its evil secrets. She never skated on Lake Sylvanus again. She tried to forget what she had seen, to bury the memory of the figures beneath the ice deep within her mind. But she couldn't. The image of Clara, the chilling whispers, the cold touch of the dead, were forever etched into her memory. The frozen lake and its dark secrets would forever haunt her dreams, a chilling reminder of the evil that lurked beneath the surface, waiting for its next victim. The ancient manor stood perched on a craggy cliff overlooking the turbulent sea, its silhouette a jagged scar against the stormy sky. Ravens circled ceaselessly above it, their harsh cawing echoing across the desolate landscape. Locals called it Ravenwood Manor, and they whispered stories of a curse, a dark legacy that had plagued the Blackwood family for generations. Isabel, a historian with a fascination for the macabre, had inherited the manor from her estranged uncle, a man she barely knew. She'd heard the tales of the curse, of the tragic deaths and unexplained misfortunes that had befallen the Blackwood family. But she dismissed them as superstition, the product of isolated lives and overactive imaginations. She saw the manor as a research opportunity, a chance to delve into her family's history and uncover the truth behind the legends. The manor was a labyrinth of echoing rooms, damp and cold, the air thick with the scent of mildew and decay. Dust lay thick on every surface, undisturbed for decades. The windows, grimy and cracked, offered a panoramic view of the churning sea, a constant reminder of the manor's isolation. Isabel, undeterred by the manor's unsettling atmosphere, began her exploration. She discovered old journals, hidden in a secret compartment in the library, detailing the Blackwood family's history. The journal spoke of a dark pact, made centuries ago by the family's patriarch, a deal with a shadowy entity in exchange for wealth and power. The price, however, was steep, a curse that would afflict every generation of the Blackwood family, a curse manifested by the ravens that had become inextricably linked to their fate. As Isabel read, she felt a chill, despite the dampness of the manor. The journals described strange occurrences, unexplained deaths, and a pervasive sense of dread that had haunted the Blackwood family for centuries. They spoke of the ravens, how their presence was a harbinger of misfortune, how their cawing was a whisper of impending doom. Isabel's skepticism began to waver. She started to notice the ravens, their numbers seemingly increasing, their cawing growing louder, more insistent. They would perch on the window sills, their obsidian eyes staring at her, their presence a constant reminder of the curse. She also started to hear whispers, faint voices murmuring in the wind, echoing through the empty halls. She couldn't make out the words, but they sounded mournful, filled with sorrow and despair. One night, she was awakened by a blood-curdling scream. It was her own. She'd dreamed of a raven, its eyes glowing with an eerie light, its talons tearing at her flesh. She sat up, her heart pounding in her chest, the room bathed in moonlight. She was alone, or so she thought. As she looked around the room, she saw a shadow moving in the corner. It was a figure, tall and gaunt, its features obscured by the darkness. It was a raven, or at least a humanoid figure with raven-like features, a hooked beak, feathered wings, and eyes that burned with the same eerie light as the raven in her dream. Isabel screamed again, but no sound came out. She tried to run, but her legs were frozen in place. The figure moved closer, its shadow stretching across the floor. She could hear the flapping of wings, the rustling of feathers. The figure reached out a clawed hand, its fingers brushing against Isabel's cheek. She flinched, expecting to feel the sharp pain of its talons. But the figure didn't attack. Instead, it whispered a single word, a word that echoed in her mind, chilling her to the bone. "Curse," it hissed. Then the figure vanished, dissolving into the shadows. The room was silent, except for the cawing of the ravens outside, their cries now sounding mocking, triumphant. Isabel knew then that the curse was real. She was a part of it, a descendant of the Blackwood family, bound to their dark legacy. She knew that the manor was not just a house. It was a prison, a place where the past refused to stay buried, a place where the ravens held sway. She tried to leave the manor, to escape the curse that clung to its walls. But she couldn't. The ravens were always there, watching her, their presence a constant reminder of her fate. The whispers followed her, echoing in her mind, driving her to the brink of madness. She was trapped, bound to the manor, a prisoner of the raven's curse. She knew that she would never escape, that she would share the same fate as her ancestors, a victim of the Dark Pact, a sacrifice to the entity that dwelled in the shadows. The ravens would be her constant companions, their cawing her death knell, their presence a chilling reminder of the curse that had claimed her soul. The air in the old courtroom crackled with a palpable tension, a weight of unspoken dread that hung heavier than the humid summer air. Elias Thorne, a lawyer known for his ruthlessness and his uncanny ability to win even the most hopeless cases, stood before the judge, his face pale, his usually sharp eyes clouded with a flicker of fear. He'd made a deal, a desperate bargain struck in the darkest hours of a particularly difficult trial, a deal with something unnatural. He'd won the case, of course, but now the devil's due was coming. Thorne had always been ambitious, driven by a relentless hunger for success. He'd risen through the ranks of the legal profession with an almost preternatural ease, his victories attributed to his brilliant legal mind and his unwavering determination. But the truth was far more sinister. He'd made a pact, a Faustian bargain with a being he'd only encountered in hushed whispers and ancient texts. He'd offered a piece of his soul in exchange for the power to sway juries, to manipulate witnesses, to ensure his triumph in the courtroom, no matter the cost. For years, the arrangement had served him well. He'd become a legend, a legal titan feared and respected in equal measure. He'd amassed wealth, power, and a reputation for being untouchable. But the whispers had grown louder. The shadows in his office seemed to deepen, and the dreams that plagued his sleep became increasingly vivid, filled with grotesque figures and chilling laughter. The courtroom doors creaked open, and a cold gust of wind swept through the room, despite the sweltering heat outside. A hush fell over the courtroom as a figure emerged from the shadows. He was tall and imposing, his features obscured by a deep cowl. He moved with an unnatural grace, his presence radiating an aura of ancient power and malevolent intent. Thorne felt a chill run down his spine. He knew who it was, the being he'd made the deal with, the entity he'd tried to forget. He'd come to collect his due. The figure moved silently towards the judge's bench, ignoring the bewildered stares of the courtroom attendees. He stopped before Thorne, his face still hidden by the shadows of his cowl. Elias Thorne, the figure rasped, his voice a low, resonant growl that seemed to vibrate through the very foundations of the building. The time has come. Thorne tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. He felt a wave of terror wash over him, a fear so profound it paralyzed him. You made a promise, the figure continued, his gaze piercing through the shadows, fixing on Thorne with an unnerving intensity. You offered a piece of your soul. Now, I have come to claim it. Thorne finally found his voice, a desperate plea. No, he stammered. I can't. I've changed my mind. I'll give you anything, money, power, anything you want. Just let me go. The figure chuckled, a low, chilling sound that echoed through the courtroom. "You misunderstand," he said. "I don't want your money or your power. I want what you promised me. I want your soul." Thorne looked around the courtroom, his eyes pleading for help. But the faces of the people around him were blurred, indistinct, as if they couldn't see him, as if he was already fading from their world. The figure reached out a hand, its fingers long and skeletal, tipped with razor-sharp claws. Thorne flinched, expecting to feel the agonizing pain of his soul being ripped from his body. But the figure didn't touch him. Instead, he pointed towards the courtroom doors. "Come," he said. "It's time to pay your due." Thorne felt a strange compulsion, an irresistible urge to obey. He stood up, his legs moving as if controlled by an unseen force. He walked towards the courtroom doors, the figure following silently behind him. As he reached the doors, he turned back to look at the courtroom, at the life he was leaving behind. He saw his wife, his children, their faces filled with confusion and fear. He wanted to call out to them, to tell them he loved them, but no words came out. He stepped through the doors, and the courtroom vanished. He found himself in a dark, desolate landscape, a place of shadows and fire. The figure stood beside him, his face now visible, his features twisted and demonic, his eyes burning with hellish flames. "Welcome," the figure said, his voice dripping with malice. "Welcome to your new home." Thorne knew then that he had made a terrible mistake. He had traded his soul for worldly success, and now he was paying the ultimate price. He was trapped, bound to this hellish realm, a prisoner of the entity he had made a deal with. The devil's due had been paid, and Elias Thorne was lost forever. His screams echoed through the desolate landscape, a testament to the eternal damnation that awaited him. The fog hung heavy, a thick, impenetrable blanket that muffled all sound and obscured the crumbling skyline. Anya, an urban explorer with a taste for the forgotten and the eerie, navigated the deserted streets, her flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive gloom. She'd heard whispers about the silent city, a place abandoned decades ago, a place where time seemed to have stopped, a place said to be haunted by a chilling silence. The story spoke of a sudden evacuation, a mass exodus triggered by an unknown event, something so terrifying that the inhabitants had fled, leaving everything behind. They said the city was still there, frozen in time, a ghostly reminder of a forgotten tragedy. Anya, drawn to the mystery like a moth to a flame, had ventured into the silent city, hoping to uncover its secrets. She'd found the access point on an old, disused subway line, a rusted gate that led into the city's heart. The silence had hit her immediately, a profound absence of sound that was more unsettling than any noise. It was as if the city itself was holding its breath. The streets were empty, the buildings standing like hollow shells, their windows dark and vacant. Dust lay thick on every surface, undisturbed for years. Anya felt a profound sense of loneliness, a feeling of being utterly cut off from the world. She explored the deserted buildings, finding remnants of lives abruptly abandoned, half-finished meals on tables, clothes hanging in closets, books left open on bedside tables. It was as if the inhabitants had simply vanished, leaving behind their possessions, their memories, their very essence. She found a newspaper, dated the day before the evacuation, its headlines hinting at a growing unease, a sense of impending doom. There were mentions of strange occurrences, unexplained phenomena, and a growing fear that something terrible was about to happen. As Anya delved deeper into the city's past, she started to feel a presence, an unseen force that seemed to be watching her. She heard faint whispers, just at the edge of hearing, like voices murmuring in an unknown tongue. She saw shadows moving in the corners of her vision, fleeting glimpses of figures that vanished as quickly as they appeared. She found a school, its classrooms filled with dusty desks and abandoned textbooks. On the blackboard in one classroom, she saw a message, scrawled in chalk, a single word that sent chills down her spine. Beware? The silence grew heavier, more oppressive. Anya felt a growing sense of dread, a feeling that she was not alone. She could feel the presence of the city's former inhabitants, their spirits trapped within its silent walls. She heard a sound, a faint, rhythmic tapping, coming from the floor above. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The tapping continued, growing louder, more insistent. She cautiously made her way upstairs, her flashlight beam dancing across the dusty walls. The tapping led her to a small room, a child's bedroom. In the center of the room, she saw a rocking horse, its painted eyes staring blankly ahead. It was rocking gently, as if someone was sitting on it. Anya approached cautiously, her hand trembling. As she got closer, she saw something else, a figure sitting on the rocking horse. It was a child, a young girl, her face pale and still, her eyes closed. Anya gasped, stumbling backward. The girl opened her eyes and Anya screamed. They were empty sockets, hollow and black, filled with an ancient, malevolent light. The girl smiled, a chilling smile that sent shivers down Anya's spine. She reached out a hand, her fingers long and skeletal. Anya turned to run, but she was too late. The girl's hand touched her arm, and Anya felt a jolt of ice-cold energy surge through her body. She collapsed to the floor, her vision blurring. She could hear whispers all around her, voices speaking in the unknown tongue. She felt a presence, cold and malevolent, pressing down on her, suffocating her. She closed her eyes, bracing herself for the inevitable. She felt a sharp pain, a searing agony that ripped through her soul. Then everything went black. Anya awoke with a gasp, her body drenched in sweat. She was back in her own bed, the familiar sounds of the city filtering through her window. It had all been a dream, she told herself. Just a vivid, terrifying dream. But as she looked around her room, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A small, dusty rocking horse sitting in the corner. Its painted eyes were staring at her, and on its saddle, a single word was scrawled in chalk. Welcome. Anya knew then that it hadn't been a dream. She had been to the silent city, and it had claimed her. She was now a part of it, a silent resident of its haunted streets, forever trapped in its chilling embrace. The silence was no longer just an absence of sound. It was a presence, a suffocating weight that pressed down on her soul, a constant reminder of the terror she had encountered. The silent city had taken its due, and Anya was now one of its own,